Hey everyone, welcome to the episode of That's All Funny. Yeah, today my guest is Mike, aka Sleazy from the wrestling show with Sleazy and the Fatman. How you doing, Mike, aka Sleazy?
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
No, man, thanks for being here. Everything cool today? It's a good day, right?
Oh, it's been a wonderful day. Uh, was able to get outside, enjoy life for about 10 minutes, maybe. Always running around, but
Oh yeah, you can't be out there too long, dude. The sun will eat anyone up. It's
mhm.
it's terribly hot outside. I don't know where you're located at, but I'm here in Texas, and just
Oh,
going outside. Yeah, the sun it eats you up. It
I
really does.
I feel so much sympathy for you, especially when it was exactly 74 degrees here today. I live in the great state of New Jersey in Atlantic City. Originally from Rochester, New York. My co-host is from Rochester as well, uh, and we've been bouncing around for many years. So, but yeah,
That's cool. No, that's like where the Ninja Turtles live and shit, right? New York up there.
yeah, up in that area, general area, yeah.
That's all I really know about New York, other than it was in the news for a while where people were getting punched like every other week.
Yeah, it's a city of 5 million people. So when four people get punched, it's kind of weird, but
Yeah.
it's like a weird anomaly, but it has the sense of copycat syndrome.
Hmm.
One person saw somebody do it, and now three other people are now doing it, and it just kind of spiders out from there.
Oh,
But
that's just the internet in general. It's a ripple effect of I don't know. I wouldn't say negativity, but just like the negative things are what catch on, not the positive things.
I mean, I now know a bunch of TikTok dances. So there's that. I mean, I I think I could the there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. I don't know
Okay.
if that weighs out the balance of how bad, the bad stuff that TikTok has done to the good stuff. Although those some of them are passable for cute or hot or whatever we fancy. I don't know if it balances out with like these trends of people accidentally hurting themselves or scamming banks for money and stuff like that when they call it a glitch.
Yeah, that's called wire fraud, guys. Um, yeah, the reality though is social media as a whole has always been like that. Before the stuff with TikTok, there's always been the Facebook posts of, hey, if you did this in this way, you might get rich, or you click
Hmm.
on this link and blah 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 blah. I'm um I'm not sure how much of a background you have on me, but outside of professional wrestling, obviously I do a professional wrestling podcast. I'm actually a security analyst. I do a lot of security work in terms of information security and whatnot, and I deal with that on a day-to-day basis. And it's very interesting to see what new scams are out there, what's out, making headlines, making news, and so on and so forth.
Well, that's got to be crazy because I mean, everyone's the hot topics AI and stuff, but like I feel like the more protected we are, or the more advanced technology gets, the more scams come out, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not like, oh, just because we have a new way to protect ourselves, it's gonna probably create three more ways for someone to scam us, right?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a tool, just like everything else.
Hmm.
It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. A gun can be used for good, a gun can be used for bad. A knife can be used for good, a knife can be used for bad. AI is the same tactic. Social media is the same tactic. You
Hmm.
can do quite a bit of damage with social media, but you can also um, make the world smaller and a better place if you use it for good. If you can take people who wouldn't normally interact with each other and allow them to interact and be able to collaborate and bring a positive message out there. There's good in that, but in the same breath. there's also a lot of bad, the hateful bullying,
Hmm.
dogpiling, the concept of doxing and whatnot. There's a lot of bad in there, and it's filtered a lot into the professional wrestling business as well, because a lot of people are getting into, I don't want to say fights, but definitely spats about, one large company versus another large company. Well, I'm a fan of this company and your company's trash, and so on and so forth. And there's this weird sense of tribalism that's going on currently in professional wrestling.
Would you say, because I know I was reading up about your podcast just called The Wrestling Show with Sleazy and The Fatman, and I hope the Fat Man is not an actual nuclear bomb. He's just an actual person, I assume, right?
It's always a joke because it's the show's called Sleazy, the wrestling show with Sleazy and the Fat Man. I'm Sleazy. He's the Fat Man, but he's the thinnest one out of all of us on the show, including our co-hosts. So it's always been one of those little joke jab things. I'm nearly 300 pounds. I've been in the professional wrestling industry for over a decade, so it's nice to have weight like this, because obviously if you look big, it's a big deal.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of strange that he called himself a fat man, but it works and the bit is alive.
It's so you've been doing this show for almost, would you say, 13 years? Right,
Uh,
14
we're
years?
we're actually going to be in next month. Next month, November. We're celebrating our 12-year anniversary. We're doing
Holy.
400 episodes. It's going to basically line up right at the exact same time, which is crazy. Yeah, we're celebrating a big milestone for us. We've been doing this for 12 full years. We started as a, as a our original tagline was two assholes with a $3 mic talking about professional wrestling, and it's grown so much over the years since then. We have a co-host now. We're doing a video podcast. We weren't doing video when we first started. We have websites, social media, live specials, all sorts of cool stuff out there.
No, that's great. And do you recall, because 12 years ago, and I don't really remember being back into wrestling 12 years ago. I know I was back real big into it with the Attitude Era, of
Mhm.
course, like everyone was, it seems. And then I fell off of it. I don't recall when, maybe with Batista when he was hot, and John
Mhm.
Cena. And then I came back when AJ Styles was back at the Royal Rumble.
Oh wow,
uh
yeah.
yeah, that's where I came back into the picture. So do you I fell off a little bit. I'm have a bit of a gap. Do you recall when you started it, you're 12 years ago, it being like the wrestling scene this toxic, or this territorial? I'm going to say territorial, right?
Territorial is a good word for it. I there really wasn't that, and to that point, it was a little bit stagnating, a little bit, because there was
Mhm.
really no, I don't want to say competition, but the competition was not on the same level as WWE. WWE has been nearly $1 billion to $1 billion company for a long time. Outside of AEW, the main um, the, the WCW ish to WWE now,
Mhm.
the second major company. There really hasn't been all that much competition. There's TNA slash Impact Wrestling, which is a very relatively small promotion out of, they were out of Nashville, but they're also out of Canada now. Ring of Honor Wrestling, which has now been purchased by AEW, but they were their own promotion in Philadelphia area. And then you had just like um, company that the Young Bucks pretty much made their name in, uh, called PWG, and
Mhm.
those are like the main independent promotions that were out there. For PWG, especially in that timeline, that 2012 when we first started, guys like Kevin Owens, the former Kevin Steen, El Generico, who's now Sami Zayn, they were all making big deals. Ricochet, um, we won't talk about Joey Ryan, but Joey Ryan was a big deal in there. And obviously the Young Bucks, Roderick Strong, Adam Cole, all these guys who are just coming up in the business, they were making a name for themselves in this small company called PWG. And they're moving over to Ring of Honor and having these very big matches, but nobody was really watching them because they weren't getting the reach that WWE always got.
Hmm.
So when AEW came, that was backed by a literal billionaire or billionaire son, depending on who you talk to. Tony Khan is the son of Shad Khan, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's this big deal about two major billion-dollar companies fighting for each other, and everyone harkens back to the days of the Attitude Era, and the WCW, WWF Monday Night Wars, and ECW and stuff like that. I grew up on ECW. I go to the 2300 Arena all the time now because I'm an hour away from it. And they run indie shows there, and occasionally when Impact comes to town, they go there. But in 2012, there was nothing really there to have that competition, to have that tribalism. To give you an idea of where that actually means, our very first show we ever reviewed on the wrestling show was the debut of The Shield. So Dean Ambrose, who's now John Moxley, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns. That was their first show, was the show we first reviewed on our show.
Wow.
So, yeah, we've been around for a bit.
And now, it seems like, because I remember, man, you just a few years ago, before when AEW was like first starting, it was kind of exciting, or it was exciting, and like, but I was still at that point where I felt embarrassed. Like I would be there talking about wrestling with my buddies at work, or a buddy or two, and someone would be like, "Oh, you're talking about wrestling? That's like, you'd be ashamed of it." But now wrestling's such a cool, like it's cool again, it's fun again, it's popular to like be a wrestling fan again. Like, how do you feel about that now, or how mainstream it feels, or how the product feels to you, since you've been like following it for so long, initially from like you said, the 12 years ago.
Yeah, just in those 12 years of the wrestling show, it's
Hmm.
changed so much. When I first became a fan, I was 7 years old. I watched my first WWF pay-per-view was the 1992 Royal Rumble. So that's how far back I go. But the reality is that at the end of the day, being mainstream means more money into the business. And more money in the business means more people get paid for what they do and what they love to do. So I will always be happy to see it in the mainstream. I will always be happy to see, and not everyone's like this. And trust me, I have lots of debates with this in regards to having people like Bad Bunny or Logan Paul in the professional wrestling industry. These guys who are not wrestlers by trade. Logan Paul is a little bit more in now than he was, than Bad Bunny was. It was a one-off for him. But having these outside the box professional superstars that are not professional wrestlers showing up in professional wrestling is a big deal to us, because that means, once again, eyes are on the product. Eyes are on places that we're getting new fans because of that. And those fans will be watching WWE, and then they'll hear, oh, there's an indie show down the road that's also doing professional wrestling. Maybe we should go to that as well. And that's the reality of what professional wrestling is to us inside the industry and in the periphery of it.
And do you think, with this, as far as like not even the mainstream now, but now that Vince McMahon kind of got usurped because of the allegations, and
Yeah.
you have the merger of TKO with was it what, UFC and WWE. Do you think that's even gonna like make it even more like the product better? Do you feel like that's how it is, or just making it more palatable for like mainstream audiences?
That's a good question. I don't think it's going to be good or bad, but it's definitely going to be different.
Hmm.
Um, TKO as a company, I'm when WWE was publicly traded, Vince McMahon and the McMahon family still had majority share. So at the end of the day, yeah, it might have been a public company, but the reins and the buck stopped with Vince McMahon. Now that it's a public company fully, and there's a lot less shareholders, and the actual company is a little bit more diluted. Obviously, Triple H is still in power. There's a question that Stephanie McMahon might take a high leading role again. Obviously, Dana White's a huge part of that as well from the
Hmm.
UFC side. I can easily say that from a public perspective, you're just going to see more and more collaborations. You're going to see more ways that they're going to try and get their brand out, not only from a US perspective, but from a worldwide perspective. And that can only be good.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it seems like they're keeping the, I don't know if you want to say the heart of it, but they're keeping the original wrestling fans entertained as far as meeting with that new audience, like you said, and opening up to other, I don't know, endeavors. Like
Right.
open to a lot of cross promotion, if not with brands, with other wrestling promotions, which is pretty unheard of. uh
Yeah. Yeah,
Recently,
absolutely.
especially with WWE. you know and how do you feel like about just like the product in general right now, personally, with like, AEW? I know when me and my buddies were first hearing about it, it was like, oh man, this is cool, and then it was cool, and then now it's kind of like it's like not not the laughing stock. It gets beat up on a lot because you have WWE that's been so well established. Like, what are your opinions on AEW? Do you think it should try competing with WWE, or do you not like it, or do you, how do you feel about the competition between AEW WWE?
It's full disclosure. First of all, I have a lot of friends in both companies. Okay, there's a lot of guys I've shared locker rooms with, I've worked with directly. There's been guys that I've spent years working in the professional wrestling industry. I'm probably in terms of how many people are on the AEW staff members, in terms of staff and wrestlers, 20% of the roster I either indirectly or directly know now. So it's hard to shit on the product of basically friends of the business,
Hmm.
or former coworkers or coworkers in the business. That
Yeah.
being said, both companies are doing great right now. They're doing a lot of great work in terms of promotional stuff, in terms of actual wrestling, in terms of actual TV deals. Obviously, AEW's got multiple television shows on major network TV or major networks. WWE is doing the unthinkable by moving their flagship show to Netflix in 2025, which was a huge deal when it was announced. There's so many good things happening on both sides of the arena that I, I, I can't not love it. I love everything about professional wrestling. So to sit here and say one's going to be outright trash, one's going to be, the best, and there's no competition, that's just simply patently false, really. There's always going to be competition in professional wrestling. That being said, I'm not going to choose one side or another, because I feel like that we spend enough time in the industry as podcasters, as reviewers, as we have a sense of integrity of saying, if it's trash, we will tell you it's trash. If it's great, we will tell you it's great. It doesn't matter if the three letters are AEW, WWE, TNA, or Ring of Honor, PWG, or Chikara. It doesn't matter to me. I'm looking for good wrestling. And if it's going to happen, I'm going to love it.
Ooh, and then it's all about one's own perception too on what they're into. Like I really liked the Tony Storm angle with her and Brian
Mhm.
May, but I mean, I might just like when girls kiss. You know what I mean? Like, that's just me. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll turn it on at the TV.
Gotta love it.
So yeah, it has a lot to do with that. And I'd say, yeah, I'm more on the WWE side. I feel more critical about AEW, but I don't have anyone I don't have like you any personal people to know in the industry and all that. But I'm just kind of a jerk, I guess, when it comes to that.
No,
Full
no,
disclosure there.
no, and that's the thing is that you like what you like. If you don't like it, that's fine. And that's the reality of it. That's kind of the problem with what's going on in social media. To kind of zoom it right back around,
Mhm,
is that people get so defensive about one side or the other because
mhm,
just because you don't like it doesn't mean that you don't want it to succeed. It doesn't mean that you don't want it to get better. Maybe it does get better. Maybe it changes their fundamental philosophy of professional wrestling to a point where, okay, well, maybe this is good. Maybe I like this part of AEW, and now that's becoming a bigger part of AEW. One of the big differences that a lot of people talk about when it comes to shows is the length. You know, the last All In if you included the pre-show, I believe it was 8.5 hours. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. There were a lot of amazing matches on there. There were a lot of
mhm,
great moments, great matches, great spots, great everything. But sitting down and watching that straight through is very hard.
mhm,
Then you take a look at Bash in Berlin. Bash in Berlin was a 5 match card, a tight 2 hours, 45 minutes. You know what I mean? They had a couple of extra spots in there. Really nice, really tight show. Loved that too. There's only one match on there that I really didn't like. And I got shit for it for saying I didn't like it on the most recent episode. So it's just how it is. Sometimes you just don't like certain things. But the reality is that professional wrestling as a whole is a three-ring circus if you do it correctly. You know, there was a gentleman who ran a promotion called Squared Circle Wrestling, 2CW in upstate New York. And he was always all about the three-ring circus. If you didn't like the first match because it was a hard-hitting, British strong style match, the second match was a comedy match. The third match was a high-flying lucha match. The fourth match was a very well-known tag team and an upstart tag team. The main event was a name that you might have known from the past versus a potential upcoming star of 2CW or upcoming star of the Indies facing each other. We got to see when he was booking this in like 2011, I think it was. We got to see the. Are you familiar with the American Wolves?
No, I'm not.
Eddie Edwards and Davey Richards. They faced Chris Sabin, Alex Shelley, the Machine Guns. They did the show on a Tuesday evening. That just random Tuesday evening. It was one of their most populated shows that they've ever done. But it was two huge up and coming tag teams, or very well known tag teams facing each other. That was the kind of stuff that he used to do. And you're starting to see that a little bit more in AEW, and you're definitely seeing that in WWE. You take a look at the Bash in Berlin card. You had something that was a little bit fun with Liv and Dom versus Priest and Rhea, and then you had this hard hitting love letter to British strong style and German strong style in Gunther versus Randy Orton. And in the right in the opening match, you had one of the most classic WWE style matches with Kevin Owens and Cody. So
Mhm.
it's like they had this really cool, like over really, it was more of a way of booking that just screams Triple H. It screams of that era of professional wrestling that I really enjoy. So,
No, yeah, no, and I don't mean to be like a hater, but
mhm,
I'm also the one that, like you said, when I'm critical, but I'm not taking it personal, like some of the internet does, where it's like, oh yeah, I don't like that. Okay, well, you don't like that. Okay, well then we don't agree. Like that's
mhm,
it. End of day. Let's move on to the next day. But some people, especially the internet's a little territorial, toxic, and they take it, either personal or as biblical, as
Mm.
like, oh no, that's my wrestling, my person you're talking about. And it's like, I don't know, like I don't know, it's a lot about that on the internet, but a lot with everything, right? Not just wrestling.
Yeah, it's always to the most extreme level,
Hmm.
and I can be just as guilty of this. One of the biggest examples of this? Are you familiar with who Leo Rush is?
Yeah, its name sounds familiar.
Currently in AEW, but he's
Hmm.
bounced around New Japan here, there, and everywhere.
Hmm.
Um, I don't like the guy, okay, because of one show he and I shared a locker room with. He was being a little asshole. He was relatively early in the business, but he was like an up and coming star at that point, and he got really pissy and I just rubbed me the wrong way. Didn't like him for years. The man is a fucking talent in the ring. Absolutely one of the best high flyers currently out there, in my opinion. Like outside of maybe Ricochet, or the Will Ospreys of the world.
Hmm.
Leo Rush can do things in that ring that no other man can do. He really can. Um, but I don't like him. I really don't. I don't like him,
Yeah.
and you can see that anytime he's in a match that I'm trying to rate, I have to put that aside as much as possible. But it always colors my opinion. It's like, God damn it. But it's just the reality of it. And sometimes I can't get away from the bias on it because I don't like him. And the reality is that happened 8 years ago, maybe longer. It could be a completely different person. I haven't talked to him since that night,
Hmm.
but I have this one picture of him, and that's it. That's all there is to it. And yeah, there's stories about him here, there, and everywhere. And I tend to believe it because I've seen it firsthand. But the
Hmm.
reality is he could be a completely changed person and you wouldn't even know. So
No, and that's just being human, and
yeah.
like us having those opinions and those feelings.
Yeah.
And is it just me, or I know that everyone else might feel it a little bit? I don't know if you do that. Like politics is becoming a lot like wrestling. Like I could see,
Oh, you mean the person who's running for president, the WWE Hall of Famer Donald Trump?
but on
I,
both sides, do you feel it?
oh yeah.
Like yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, politics is all about the gamemanship. It's all about the working. You're trying to work your audience into believing in what you believe in. And in professional wrestling, you're making your audience believe in that this contest, this person across the ring that I'm working with as somebody I hate more than anything else, and I'm trying to do the best I can to defeat that man. What's Tell me, did I talk about politics there or did I talk about professional wrestling?
But then you even hear like the territorial thing. Oh, look at those crowds in the
Mhm.
arena against these
Yeah,
crowds. It's just like, what is this literally wrestling that we're talking about, or candidates?
it's no
Like,
different. It
yeah, look at
really
the
is no
promo.
different.
Look at the
Yeah.
promo they just delivered at this rally. Man, that was
Tim Waltz,
everything.
hell of a promo. Holy shit. God damn. Get that man over now. He is the next Biden in that respect. Yeah, and the reality is that that's why you see a lot of local politicians or local or professional wrestlers become local politicians. Guys like Jesse the Body Ventura, Rhino more recently became.
Mm,
Let me say, I want to say a local senator. It wasn't a state. It wasn't like a U.S. senator, but like a state senator. Obviously, the more famous ones like Jesse Ventura, but also Inoki was part of the parliament in Japan. Okada, I think, had a local spot there too. There's
Kane.
a Kane, fucking Kane. The, Let me tell you something about Kane. Kane's character in professional wrestling is the perfection of a progression of a storyline. This man started his life out, obviously in kayfabe, as a burned kid of his older brother's problem, okay? He gets older, vows revenge, gets into the place where his brother is, and he figures out that maybe I'm not as much of a fuck up as I should be. You know, maybe this is really truly all in my head. They, you know, him and his half brother come together, and his father's, there with him too, and they're all, hunky dory and everything. And Kane, as he progresses, he gets pissed again, and he's got to take off the mask, and that drives him insane. Like, no one's gonna like who I am now that the mask is off, and blah 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 blah. And as the storyline progresses, you see him. Okay, now there's corporate Kane. Corporate Kane is probably my favorite gimmick of all time, just because it's so rooted in realism of this is a man who worked his way up through a company and now has gotten a spot where he can make a shit ton of money as a corporate figurehead because he finally made his way into a world where he could make a difference. And every once in a while, somebody will piss him off and he has to revert and go and ape shit on somebody. But that's how it works. And in real life, Glenn Jacobs is an asshole. He is a fucked up human being in terms of political leaning, but it's no different. He's probably one of the smartest guys in professional wrestling. Him and JBL were so good with their money that they were able to easily retire and not have to go back to work, not have to do a lot of the indie handshake, meet and greets and bullshit for many years after their prime because they had the money that they've saved and invested and did a lot of work with that. A lot of the professional wrestlers after their heyday, they blew their money on cars, houses, drugs, all sorts of different stuff. So when they came out and all of a sudden the money's not there anymore, they didn't know what to do. Glenn Jacobs is probably one of the few people that didn't have that problem because of that. And to a lesser extent, although in the same way, Triple H is like that. He found where he needed to be post active wrestler. And there's a lot of guys that transition. John Cena, the aforementioned Batista that we talked about. They all went to movies. The Rock is probably the biggest one of that caliber. But they found a life after professional wrestling. And I have no idea where I was going with all of this, but I will tell you got me on Kane, and that's what happened. But yeah, there's so many different things like that where it's like politics tends to be very divisive, and you're seeing a lot of that politics in professional wrestling because of it. Not everyone loved Logan Paul becoming part of the WWE roster, me included, because I don't like Logan Paul, but that motherfucker can go in the ring.
Yeah.
Just is what it is. He is a gifted physical specimen.
And he seems to respect like the sport, from everyone you hear, like as far as like a podcast or in the locker room or some stuff like that, you always hear that he's respectable to the athletes and the sport.
I respect people who come to this sport and are respectful of the sport, because professional wrestling is built on respect. It's built on walking up and saying thank you, walking up and shaking hands of everyone in the locker room. It's about saying, yes, I am taking care of you, you're taking care of me, because at any point in a snap of a finger, you could be left paralyzed or worse in the ring if somebody doesn't take care of you. And that's a very real thing that does happen. Just ask guys like Draws, who unfortunately passed away not that long ago, but he was paralyzed in the ring because of a botched maneuver. It does happen. It does. Well, Big E Langston is a more recent example of that. Poor Ridge Holland. That was a freak accident, but it happens. That happens in wrestling. It ain't ballet, and there's a reason for that.
Well, what's crazy too is where you're talking about respect, you can still hate your opponent like personally, but still have respect for him and still do work with them. You know, like a lot of these, you hear stories of what, like CM Punk, of course, like not being liked by a lot of people, but
Yeah.
they still work with him because it's like, okay, well, that's money, you know, or whatever. That's work, you know.
Yeah. You think about, if you want to think about a butterfly effect, this is the craziest thing in the world. Okay? Prince Devitt, Finn Balor, is the reason why CM Punk is in WWE.
How do you say that? How so?
So, well, technically, I could go even further than that. Carl Anderson is the reason why CM Punk is in the WWE after leaving for 8 years or however long he was gone. Carl Anderson, Prince Devitt formed the Bullet Club in New Japan Pro Wrestling. New Japan Pro Wrestling brought in a lot of guys into the Bullet Club. It was like the NWO in terms of how much money they were making. Bullet Club shirts were everywhere for years. Like this was the big deal, you know? Um, and that's where the Young Bucks really put themselves on the map at a higher level. Obviously, they were doing PWG, a lot of local shows and Ring of Honor and whatnot, but they were known as like them and Kenny Omega and all these guys were part of the Bullet Club, including Cody Rhodes, including the aforementioned Omega. All of those guys were the reason why AEW started. So you had all these guys with huge contacts putting themselves together, getting themselves into AEW, started this brand new promotion. No idea this was going to happen, right? There was never going to be a time where another huge company would come literally out of thin air, right? And they managed to get Punk on Starcast thanks to Conrad Thompson. He was on Starcast 3 with when they did the third All In. Because of that, and being able to sit there and put two and two together and get everything set up in such a perfect way, Punk comes to AEW. Holy shit. And of course, the whole shit with AEW and Punk and Cry Me a River, that's real glass, you know, the
Hmm.
whole Jack Perry incident and Brawl Out and all that shit. All that stuff happens. And the literal never say never thing that even Punk will happily sit there and say, I will never come back to WWE. And that motherfucker goes right back to WWE. So Carl Anderson is the reason why CM Punk is in WWE. Craziness. Fucking batshit crazy. That's how professional wrestling is. That man would never be in the business again if it wasn't for AEW. And he would never be in WWE again if it wasn't for AEW. And it wouldn't, and none of that happens without the Young Bucks knowing who, working with Cody, working with Kenny Omega, in part of the Bullet Club.
Yeah, no, it's crazy the way wrestling is. It's I don't know if you'd call it a soap opera. No, I don't know if you call it. I don't know. It's just it's amazing. Some of the, you know, like you said, never say never. It's a lot of never say nevers, like
Oh,
especially
yeah.
now.
Nobody
Yeah.
thought AJ Styles was going to WWE. Nobody thought that. Everyone thought he was going to end his career in TNA. And for a lot of people, they were okay with that. It was one of those guys that yeah, you know, it's sad that he didn't get the recognition he deserved. He has a multiple time WWE champion. He is the last match of The Undertaker. You know,
Hmm.
getting a rub like that, unbelievable. You know, that man has had a legendary career just in WWE, never mind his previous stuff. And I could dare say that he had a legendary career before he came to WWE.
Hmm.
AJ Styles is a first ballot Hall of Famer as soon as he retires.
No,
So,
definitely. You know, speaking of the Undertaker and all these, like, you know how all these podcasts are popping up now for or they have been, like for older wrestlers, right? Or even people in the business now, the business in the wrestling business. I'm talking like I'm in the business. Uh, do you think it's a good thing to have like the curtain peeled back that far, where like one day we're seeing the match, and then the next day we see how the sandwich is made? You know what I mean? Like the sausage. Is that, do you think that's a good
Yeah,
thing or a bad thing?
there's a lot of opinions about that, and
Hmm.
I don't know where I land on it because part of, obviously, we've been in the business 12 years. We were one of the first professional wrestling podcasts. We like to joke that we were the second oldest professional wrestling podcast after Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling, because Colt started his show like a year and a half before us. So we're like the old school pro wrestling guys. A lot of the times back in those days, kayfabe was held up. You really didn't do that kind of shit all that much. The only
Hmm.
time you saw that stuff were shoot interviews, the Kevin Steen show, um, RF video stuff, and first of all, fuck Rob Feinstein. By the way, if I hadn't said that once today, I should. But yeah, just those shoot interview style stuff. I really love that kind of content. That's like crack to me. Like I love that shit. But in the same breath, it does expose the business. It does expose what is going on in the background. I don't think that it stops most people enjoying the content, because it's no different than looking at professional actors' lives. Like, well, yeah, obviously Leonardo DiCaprio didn't like Kate Winslet when they kissed, but that doesn't mean that they're not professional actors. And we want to hear the story, the juicy gossip from Titanic and stuff like that. But at the same breath, we still appreciate the creation of the product that they've made, the movie itself. And it's no different in professional wrestling. Yeah, we like the news and rumors and the juicy gossip backstage, and how Enzo Amore doesn't like this guy, and Roman Reigns will never work with Goldberg again, blah 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 blah. But the reality is that that's kind of divorced from the fact that we're still watching the product. We're still watching what they've put together in terms of these matches, these segments, these promos, and so on and so forth. I think I can separate it. Not everybody can, and I know there's a sense of there's another industry that's very big on this, magic.
Yeah.
Um, are Forgive me, but have you watched like the Secrets of Magic Untold series that they had on Fox like 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Have you ever
I
did you hear of those?
I know what you're talking about, but I was like, nah, I don't need to like ruin it. You know what I mean? It's
Well,
to me, it's like you go out of your way to like, I don't want that ruined for me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
it's suspension of disbelief.
Hmm.
And there's the reality of it. I can appreciate a magic trick happening in front of me even if I know how it's done, because I enjoy not just the trick, but I enjoy the skill of the magician actually doing the moves, doing the bits and pieces in front of me. Because if I can't catch it, how fucking good is that magician? You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
Penn and Teller is a great example of this. Penn and Teller are probably one of the best magic duo of all time. Uh, they have a great sense of why magic works, and that's mainly from Teller's perspective too. Penn's a carny like the all of us in professional wrestling. He and I like this, in terms of wavelength, in terms of thought processes. Love, I will actively go out and listen to any interview he does. He's great. Um, that being said, they still preserve the suspension of disbelief for magic. And I think that's what keeps magic going as much as it has. The Chris Angels and the David Blaine's and whatnot. They're cool. They do cool stuff, but at the end of the day, they're not why magic works. Penn and Teller is why magic works. Shin Lim is why magic works. The guys that have come up in the business that like know magic and breathe magic. It's the same feeling that you get in a locker room in professional wrestling because once again, it's all the same thing. It's all about passion. Doesn't matter if it's politics. Doesn't matter if it's professional wrestling. Doesn't matter if it's comedy. Comedy is the same way. Just because I know that bit, I know how to put that bit together, doesn't mean that I can go out and entertain 5,000 people in front of on a stage somewhere. I'm not Jimmy Pardo. I'm not going to sit here and say that I can just go to any club and do crowd work for 45 minutes and have people leave like they have a great time. There's a reality of that. There's guys like Dane Cook, who's filling arenas, Gabriel Iglesias, and all these huge hard hitters of professional comedy. They're writing material, but they're also performing it. And that suspension of disbelief that happens in comedy shows is similar because they're all passionate about it. And I think even in our business of podcasting, we're passionate about podcasting. And that's the biggest difference between somebody who's just getting on a show to just divulge secrets and that's it for a quick payday versus somebody who really respects the industry that they're in. The guys like Colt Cabana, the guys like the wrestling show, as much as I like to toot my own horn, but guys like Jimmy Pardo and Never Not Funny, just to kind of roll over here. Mark Maron, the old school, Conan O'Brien when he came in. Like Conan O'Brien was not an early adopter of podcasting, but he comes in with a fucking hammer and quickly becomes one of the biggest shows, the podcasting shows in the world. But the reality is he sat there and went, this is why I want to do this. And the passion behind it is what makes a quality product. So.
No, definitely. And even circling back to the beginning when we talked about AI, AI can generate these sort of prompts too and things like that. And there's just no passion behind it. It's just, again, the tool and not like the person performing with the, with the tool or with the instrument or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at the end of the day, people gravitate towards the people who are passionate about what they're doing. And it doesn't really matter what that thing is. We spend a lot of time in our lives watching television, TikTok, social media, movies, professional wrestling, everything like that. But there are a lot of people in this life that are passionate about what they do that don't get the recognition they deserve. The first line workers, people who spend many hours of their lives trying to help people. They're good, bad, or indifferent. They're passionate about what they do in life, and I think there's not enough recognition of that as a whole in our society, because part of the reasoning behind that is that a lot of times those types of passions are built from seeing that there's a need that isn't being fulfilled somewhere. Are you familiar with the orphan crushing machine?
No.
There's a I guess a joke, and it turned into a subreddit too. But about the orphan crushing machine, and thank God we stopped the orphan crushing machine. But why did the orphan crushing machine exist in the first place? But everyone's so happy that the orphan crushing machine is, been stopped once and for all. And there's a lot of stuff in our society that's like that, where we are, we're praising the people doing it, but for the wrong reasons. The kids who spend, many hours selling lemonade so they can pay their fellow school kids lunch debts off at school so they can eat at school again. Like stupid shit like that. It happens all the time in our society, and sad. Not to go too deep in that political arena, but it's just something. It just brings a point of once again, passion more than anything else. So,
And finally, I want to talk about, you're talking about passion. Um, is there there's names that I'm going to throw at you like Hulk Hogan,
mhm,
Ric Flair, Chris Benoit, right? Names that are so I mean, especially Chris Benoit, where they done so much for the business, but then there's that asterisk and the bad things that they've done, right? Whether conspiracy theory, believe it or not, or this and that, or how you feel about each person. Um, do you think we should like separate like the art from the artist, or should they always have that, yeah, he was a good worker, but I can't I'm always gonna have to bring this up when we talk about him, or when we talk about Hulk Hogan being racist, Chris Benoit and the terrible tragedy, Ric Flair and the helicopter ride, or the plane ride from hell, like
mhm.
do you think we should have to keep bringing these up when we talk about it in wrestling, or is it like forever gonna be like, no, it's an asterisk, it's we gotta.
It's hard. The Chris Benoit situation. I have you if you've ever listened to Paul Heyman talk, who once again huge fan of,
Hmm.
love him to death. He will tell you that that weekend, three people died, but only one chose to. And while I agree with that statement, I will also say this: professional wrestling is one of the hardest sports in this of just anything.
Hmm.
CTE and brain damage and traumatic brain injuries can do a hell of a lot of damage. I'm not going to sit here and say that he should be forgiven for what he's done. I'm not going to sit here and say that we should forget about that. I'm not even going to say that you should ignore that to preserve his legacy, even. Um, my co-host Fatman is, was a huge fan of Chris Benoit, like one of the biggest fans of Chris Benoit before
Hmm.
that happened, and now he can't even talk about matches of his.
Hmm.
So I get it, I understand it. It's how you have to compartmentalize heinous things. Do you believe that OJ Simpson is one of the best running backs or whatever he was? I wide receiver. I don't remember. I'm
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
football guy, but one of the greatest football guys of all time.
Hmm.
Well, he also killed two people, but still was a great football player.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do we separate that? Not really. In the same breath, do we separate the fact Pete Rose was gambling on the game and is also one of the best uh, baseball guys of all time?
Yeah.
MLB Hall of Fame tends to think, no, fuck you, you're never coming in here. But I don't. It depends on what the crime is. It depends on what the circumstances are. It depends on a lot of different factors, and I think it's hard to separate the art from the artist, especially when the artist has done heinous stuff. Like, are you an R. Kelly fan?
Yeah, even like Kanye West too, I could say too, the things
Yeah,
he has said, and R. Kelly,
said,
uh
done.
P Diddy, or even that
Yeah,
going on. Yeah, it's a lot of there's a lot of that where oh man, I really like his music, or I really like his work, but and then
mhm.
you start naming off things.
Yeah. Death row label. I mean, you want to go really deep into like, gangster rap and shit like that, where they were doing shit that was just horrific. But I know people that fucking live and breathe West Coast rap. That is who they are as an individual, and they will never take that away. In fact, in some ways, that gives it credibility. You know,
Hmm.
um, it's it's interesting because it all depends on your perspective on life, I guess. Like, at what point like do you care that so and so has a huge drug rap against them? I don't. I Even if you're fucked up all the time on heroin and fentanyl and whatnot, If you are trying to get help, great. If you got pinched and had to spend 10 years in jail for selling it because that's all you had in your life at that moment, that's what happens. There's lines, obviously.
Hmm.
The big ones is, sexual assault and stuff like that, and obviously murder and whatnot. But there's a lot of crimes that I don't necessarily believe make you a bad person for doing them, um, and can be forgiven. There's always the standing joke of speaking out. We had that back in 2020. We had that huge deal where like there was a bunch of women that were talking about how so and so got fresh and whatnot, and we were a part of that. There
Hmm.
we had a friend of mine was on the show. Well, indirectly was on the show. She didn't want to know who it was, but we had talked about her story because she wanted it publicly known that that's what happened in the back. And I've been in the back for, like I said, over a decade. I've seen some shit. I have had to say, what the fuck are you doing in a locker room more than once. But even then, that was not as bad as it was in the 90s, 80s, and even further back. The Fabulous Moolah is probably one of the most legendary women's wrestlers of all time, and her legacy is tarnished because she was pimping out her fellow women, her fellow
Hmm.
women wrestlers. Like, what the fuck? Like, how do you reconcile that? I can't, and I love women's wrestling. Women's wrestling, I'm probably one of the biggest, at least from a public standpoint, probably one of the biggest fans and biggest flag bearers for women's wrestling. Huge fan of Stardom, huge fan of Joshi wrestling, huge fan of American wrestling when it's on TV, huge fan of British wrestling when it's on TV. When it comes to women's wrestling, so all these women spend so much time and effort to get up there, and they have people look up to, like the Fabulous Moolah. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
God damn it. But it's just a reality of stardom. Not everyone is a good person, and everyone has shades of gray. And if you look hard enough, you'll always find something. The question is, can you reconcile the fact that not everyone's a complete good person?
Yeah. No, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and it
Yeah.
just, like you said, depends on, I don't know, how transparent you are, maybe, or how the person themselves reacts to the way or whatever they're guilty of, right?
Mhm.
I guess it just depends on their character per se,
Yeah. What do they follow?
Yeah.
What do they follow? What means something to them?
Hmm. Or either that, or they just have a good publicist, and it works for they end up turning heel, and it works for them, brother. They just lead into it.
And then Booker T comes out and says his famous line. But the reality is that guys like Hulk Hogan, guys like Chris Benoit, if you want to be very frank with it, Hulk Hogan is the reason why wrestling exists today. There is no way around
Hmm.
that. He's
Hmm.
also a racist piece of shit.
Yeah, that's proven
A
in court,
racist
I
piece of
believe.
shit that is one of the biggest carnies in the business, because everyone believes this, that he has. Do you remember the whole sex tape thing? I'm not going to go deep in this because I know we're getting
Uh,
long on
v-
time here.
yeah, vaguely about it. Yeah.
He basically got Bubba the Love Sponge's wife, and they had a sex tape, and it
Hmm.
got dumped onto Gawker, I think it was.
Hmm.
And basically Hulk Hogan was the cardy son of a bitch that set them up. That's really what happened there. He was bankrolled by a billionaire who tried to get one of his videos pulled down and couldn't. So he got Hulk Hogan to basically carny his way in there, and bankrolled him into suing Gawker to into the ground. That's the wrestling business is a Hulk shell. Don't forget, Hulk Hogan has a 10-inch penis. Terry Bollea does not.
You got to separate the man from the character,
So
right?
yeah, that is That is our business in a nutshell, right there. That statement.
And it's kind of the world now. Like
Yeah.
I said, politics, it bleeds. It's all bleeding over to everything else.
Yeah.
Even in podcasting too, I'm sure, and stuff. You don't know what's a work and what's a shoot.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's life, man. But no, I want to thank you so much, Sleazy, for coming on the show today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Uh, they could find you the wrestling show with Sleazy and the Fatman.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll
mhm.
throw the plugs out there because I always do it every week. I do this. You can we're at Sleazy Fatman X, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. Please like and follow us there. You can find our videos at twitch.tv/Sleazy and the Fatman, youtube.com/Sleazy and the Fatman, and we even have premium content on onlyfans.com/The Wrestling Show. Uh, Stupid thing, we did a bit 200 episodes ago, and I was like, oh god, I got to get the URL now just in case somebody tries to get us. You can find all of our social media content and all that stuff at Linktree at linktr.ee/sleazyfatman. And of course, thewrestlingshow.com for articles, merch, and all that kind of stuff. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man, for coming on today. Really
mhm.
appreciate the time. Talk about wrestling anytime. And yeah, no, I hope nothing but success in your future endeavors. And yeah.
Jeez, throwing me out to the pasture. I hear TNA's hiring.
I thank everyone for listening. We'll see y'all next time. Take care. Bye.